Okay, guys, second strategy for solving quadratic equations. Using the square root property right here, we'll call this our second strategy. It tells us that if x squared is equal to k, if we take the square root of both sides, that means x is equal to k or x is equal to negative square root of k. If you remember, just a quick example is if I had x squared equals 4 and I took square roots, then that's when your teacher used to tell you you have to put the plus or minus. So x would be plus or minus 2 because it could be 2 squared is 4 or negative 2 times negative 2, that's also 4. That's why we need the plus or minus. That's whenever we have an even root. Okay, so second root or square root, fourth root, sixth root, etc. So using that, I'm going to solve some equations. Now, I could move 121 over and factor, so there's a lot of times you got options on how you want to do this. But if they're on opposite sides, why not take square roots of both sides? So I can do that because I know square root of x squared is just x. And I need to put plus or minus here. That's the big thing to remember. Well, I guess that means x equals plus or minus 11. So my solution set is negative 11 and 11. And if you plug those in, you can see that does satisfy the equation. So not too bad, usually pretty quick. Now look at this one. This one's interesting. If I take square roots of both sides, then I'm going to be taking the square root of a negative number. Uh-oh. Is that a real number? No, it's not. It's not a real number. What it is it's going to end up being a complex number, right? Specifically, I think with a whole imaginary part. So when I look at this, I'm going to remember what we did in our last section is I'm going to say, well, this is the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 400. And I'm going to say, okay, well, x is equal to plus or minus root 400 is 20, and square root of negative 1 we know is I. So my solution set is negative 20i and 20i. And if you check this, I will in this case, if I put in 20i and I square it, that should be equal to negative 400. Let's see. Square 20, you get 400. Square I, you get I squared. And I'm trying to see if this is equal to negative 400. And I'm running off the page. So now I'm back. Now, I squared is negative 1. And so we're seeing that in the end, we get negative 400 equals negative 400. And that checks out. Likewise, negative 20i will check out. Okay, so now we're using these imaginary numbers. How about over here? Now it's not just x squared, it's x minus 4 squared. Can I still undo that square root or still undo that square by doing square roots? Of course I can. So if I take the square root of both sides, I have x minus 4, and we have our plus or minus square root negative 5. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I got to change that to imaginary. So this is plus or minus root negative 1, root 5. X minus 4 equals plus or minus root 5 times I. But I don't want x minus 4. I want x. So add 4 to both sides. Now it's important here, when you add this 4, is that going to get plus or minus? No, that does not get the plus or minus. So our answer is 4 plus or minus square root of 5 times I. So if I write that in a solution set, that's going to be 4 minus root 5i and 4 plus root 5i. And you can check those if you'd like. So that's going to be our second strategy of solving these.